Hello paper crafters. Today I'm going to show you how to use stencils in different ways. This is more of a technique video. This particular stencil is cement tile from Fun Stamper's Journey, and as you can see on one side I've marked color, and you'll understand as I go through this to show you why I've done that. I'm using my Platinum 6 machine, but you could use any die cut machine also. However, today with doing this particular techniques, I'm not using the two cutting plates. I'm using my platform. I'm using my stencil. I am using my piece of whipped cream cardstock. I am using my rubber mat. And I am using my embossing plate. And remember, all these things come with your machines, both the rubber mat and the embossing one. Okay, I'm going to turn this just a little so that I can run it through. You know, that one didn't do real well, so I'm going to redo that one. Put my stencil, my cardstock, my rubber mat, and my embossing plate. Okay, now let's see if I have better luck doing it this time. Okay, now I know that right now it's going to be extremely hard to see. Okay, but I've done it and you can see it, it is raised. All right, on here. Now I'm going to do something else with this piece in just a minute, but I'm going to lay it aside for right now. Now I'm going to take a piece of watercolor paper, our color splash page, and what I'm going to do, because it is color splashed, it is for watercolors, I'm going to take it and I'm going to wet it. I'm taking my medium mister and I'm going to wet my cardstock. This is the color splash paper. And I'm doing this to both sides. Now, I could also, if I wanted to, take some of our watercolor splash inks and do that. But I decided today I want to try something different. And so I'm taking some of our sparkle silk and I'm going to shake it good so I've got it all going, and I'm just going to splatter some of it on my paper. Then I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm just going to move it around. If I don't have enough water, because it is water-based, I can simply add some more water and make it a little bit wetter and spread it again. Now when you do this, one of the things that I found is that you're going to want your paper to dry some. And so what I did is I started working with this one. I simply let it sit and dry a little bit before I put it through my machine. You know, it's pretty wet. You may be able to tell that. So I'm just going to let it sit in my box and it will dry, and once it's dried, then just like I did the first one, I can run it through my machine, and when I do, this is what I'm going to have. Let's set the box aside. I'm going to have a piece that looks like this, and it is all raised, you can see it. So this is now ready to be used on the front of a card. If I wanted to, I could add more of my sparkle silk. Remember, the sparkle silk has the little metallic pieces in the bottom. So you need to make sure you have it shaken up real well. All right, and then I'm just going to tap a little bit and put a few more of these little dots of sparkle silk on. And now this one is ready to be made into a card. So there's number 2 technique. All right, number 3 technique is taking the stencil. Now remember, I've stenciled this after it had dried, and I've stenciled my white piece. All right, I'm going to use this in a minute to show you something. But now I want to use my stencil as a stencil. I'm going to actually use it and ink over it. Now when I do this, what I like to do is lay down my paper in a cardstock, and I use a piece of our electric green. Then I put my stencil on, and I make sure with my stencil that I've got the color side. All right, because on this side, just in case I don't get all my ink off and it stains it some, it's not going to hurt anything, but I know that I always want to ink on this side. So now what I'm going to do, because my paper here that I've cut is 5.5 by 8 1/4. When I do this technique, I like to give myself more room so that I can trim down my cardstock here to make the front of my card, and I need a piece that would measure 5 1/4 by 4. So I always do this one a little bit bigger. And then I make sure that I tape down my stencil, because as I'm doing this one, I don't want this thing to move. What I'm using for this is Cool Pool Play ink. And what I'm simply doing now is I'm going to go over with the dauber, and I'm just rubbing in my color. Now of course you can put as much color or as little color as you want, because you have control of it with your dauber. And I like the cement tile stencil because really you can use it for a lot of things. I'll show you a finished card that I did with this one. And I did a birthday card with it because I'd used the blues in it. And you can look at your stencil and see if you've missed any of these little tiny spots. And then you can just go back and fill it in with a little more of your ink. Okay, so there's that one. It looks pretty good. But now I want to add some more color to it. So I'm going to take off that particular dauber and add on my other one. And now I'm using the chambray shirt. And what I'm doing is I'm simply putting it in the center part, so that my very center of each of these, which happens to have hearts on it, is darker than my other parts of this card. So now with this one, I can take off my electric green tape . And take off my stencil. And you can see that I've got some ink on my stencil, so I'll go ahead and clean it in a few minutes. So there it is. Now I can cut it down to fit my card. So that's another way to do that background. Now I'm going back to the one that I did with just the plain white, and you'll now see this really pop. And what I did with it is I took our clear pigment ink pad and I went over my whole card. Now, you're not going to see any color right now, obviously, because this is clear. Then I took a pan pastel, and this set happens to be the Party Pop, and I took out of here our candy apple and the sponge that came with the set, and now I'm going to pop this one with color. My clear pigment ink that I put on earlier will pick up more of my pan pastel than the other part will, okay, because what's raised will color more darker than what the rest of my card base will be. So you could do this with any stencil, you could do this with any of your colors. For this particular one, I really like the pan pastels because the ink helps it to it holds the pan pastel right on your card so that it will not rub off. And there again, you can add as much or as little as you want. This was one that I did last night. Same technique, same product. So now these are ready to be trimmed up and to be made into a card. So there's the third technique. So you've got one technique where you're using your watercolor splash paper. You've wet it. I put on the little extra and with a brush on this golden silk. Ran it through after the paper started to dry pretty well. I've got my embossed part. Now that's ready for a card. This one over here, of course, I used the ink and did the stencil. And then with this one, I did the stencil first, running it through plain, and then put the clear pigment ink and our pan pastel on top of it. The one I finished doing was one of these because I have some men's birthdays here in November. And so I did them up this way. I went ahead and I made my base like I did here and cut it down. And then my card base is the chambray shirt, which of course is the color for my little hearts. And then I took the stamp set celebration script and I used the happy birthday. This has dies with it, and as you can see, when I do them, I usually die cut several of different colors out. So this was this one, and the cardstock here that I used was the pool play. So this card, one of them similar to this one, got sent to someone for their birthday this month. So this is one of the things you can do. You can do anything with these that you want, but it's a way to use a stencil other than just what most of the time we think a stencil is for, is to color. Well, we colored them, but we did them in all different ways. So you can use your stencils for embossing. And a lot of people don't realize that you can, but you can, and it works just fine. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. My email is serif, S as in Sam, ERIF1 @AOL.com. And yes, it is my last name backwards. You can also find all the information on my blog, which is my website, www.janies/angelhugs.com. So if you have any questions, let me know. Have a great and blessed day.